and then turn it over to Brianne Fisher with our Transportation and Sustainability Department.
Hello, everyone. As Shauna mentioned, my name is Brianne Fisher. I am the Sustainability and Resilience Division Supervisor, and I'm kind of the point of contact on this project. However, part of a much larger team that includes traffic engineering and transportation planners, all coming together to kind of work as a holistic team for this project. So, what are we discussing today? We're going to just, over this presentation, over this hour, we're going to kind of explain why we're here, why Miller Road, why this timing, and we are going to provide some context, some data and context from the city side that shapes the character of Miller Road. Obviously, we'll want to hear from you all. That's the point of this public meeting. You all drive, walk, bike Miller Road more than we do, so your input is necessary as part of this. And then we're going to review the Miller Road improvements and answer any questions that you all have. The image you see is the project area of the infrastructure improvements. This will be not the last time you see that map. So just for some background, again, why Miller Road and why now? The city over the last year has seen an increase in residential complaints around the safety on Miller Road, mostly as it relates to high speeds and high traffic volume. Miller Road is also scheduled to receive Pavement Quality Index. If you're not familiar with the PQI program, voters of Tempe actually just passed a very large bond to improve many of the Tempe streets. And so what you see on the screen is a picture of planned PQI projects improving the pavement of your street. So Miller Road, again, as you can see, is scheduled for 2025. And the Transportation and Sustainability Department thought, what a wonderful opportunity to piggyback off of the PQI work that is already scheduled. And while the road is already going through construction, make some additional improvements that can address those safety complaints and concerns that we've heard from our residents. So the character of Miller Road, as you can see from the picture, it is a collector street. Just a quick definition, a collector street is a road that connects local or neighborhood roads to arterial roads. So a local or neighborhood road would be a Marnie or a Valerie. Those are neighborhood roads close to Miller. And then, of course, an arterial will be a Scottsdale Road or a McClintock. That's roads that are moving a lot more traffic. And so a collector is really that in between. And so as you can see from some traffic counts, Miller Road it's seeing about 3,700 vehicles per day. And Miller Road the speed limit is 35 miles per hour, but as you can see from the screen, it is experiencing northbound around 38 miles per hour and southbound around 43, 44 miles per hour. This street also has Orbit Earth circulator on it. You can see some of the ridership numbers and, of course, some of the wonderful neighborhood assets. It has North Tempe Multi-Gen Center, Indian Bend Wash Pathway, Indian Bend Park, and the elementary school. A little bit more about the character of Miller Road, the climate character of Miller Road. You'll see the first image, canopy cover. This is really outlining how much coverage this census tract that Miller Road is in has. As you can see from the key, there is a darker green displays more canopy cover. So this census tract is really one of the lowest categories. It's not the lowest, but it's the second lowest. And we can assume that canopy cover makes for an increased canopy cover makes for a cooler environment. And less heat exposure and less heat-related sickness, illness, and comfort levels overall. The middle map is heat exposure. So it takes canopy cover, vegetation, and it pairs it with other elements like land surface temperature, day and night surface temperature, and albedo. Albedo is reflectivity. So for instance, asphalt has very low reflectivity. It holds on to all of that heat. And so we've taken a bunch of those elements and we've put an index together. And as you can see, again, from that heat exposure middle picture, the heat exposure is at that 1.3 to 0 kind of range. And then moving to the last image, heat vulnerability, that's looking at heat exposure plus demographic information. The 65 plus population in this neighborhood, income level, those living alone, the percent of folks in poverty ranges, those are some of the demographics that are more vulnerable to extreme heat and extreme temperatures. And so heat vulnerability in this area is relatively high. Not the highest in this city, but again, that 0.15 to 1.5 range. So a little bit more information before we get into the proposed changes. We've got Tempe's approach really to keeping streets safe is Vision Zero. I'm sure some of you all have heard of Vision Zero, a plan adopted by council a couple years ago. And really, for safe streets, it takes 3 different kind of interventions. There's education, enforcement, and engineering. While the city is doing a lot of education and enforcement, for instance, the city council will be putting forward some photo enforcement cameras at major intersections. This is an enforcement strategy. The one that's probably most relevant to folks in this area is going to be a location at Curry and Scottsdale Road. However, what we're really focused on today is those engineering strategies, those engineering infrastructure improvements that can change people's behaviors. Another Tempe approach that we are using as these changes, as we're looking at these infrastructure changes, is our Rain to Roots program. This is, again, goes to that climate character and those 3 maps that I displayed earlier. How are we making sure there's shade for all users of the streets and the roads? And green stormwater infrastructure is a great way, as you can see from the image, when there's rainfall, to capture some of that rain into the planter area. The planter area provides larger root space for the trees to be more sustainable in windstorms and have a larger shade canopy. There's multiple benefits to green stormwater infrastructure. You're using some of that asphalt space and creating a cooler environment, and you're also cleaning the water. Typically, when rainfall happens, the water is drained into storm drains, and it's taking all of those pollutants with it, and it goes into our waterways. So the more we can clean that up with natural systems, the better, and that's what green stormwater infrastructure does. So here's where we're getting into more of the nitty-gritty of the infrastructure changes. Here's the existing conditions. And just again, as a quick overview, there's 1 lane in each direction, 1 driver lane in each direction. There's 5-foot bike lanes on both sides. And then there's 8 feet on-street parking. And there's a small area of residential permit parking on a stretch of Miller Road, kind of south of Tempe Drive. So that's the existing conditions. Some of the changes that will be going forward are speed cushions, planter islands, some green thermos, so some green paint highlighting, some bike lane. This will happen kind of near intersections, pedestrian crossing, and then some speed reductions. And I'll talk a little bit more about these things in the next slide. So this is the proposed improvements that we have. As you can see, the purple circles are indicating speed cushion locations, and the green circles are identifying planter islands. In total, there will be 6 speed cushions and 6 pairs of planter islands. Those planter islands are taking place on both sides, providing a little visual squeezing and narrowing of the street. On-street parking will be maintained the rest of the way through. The parking islands will be taking away, of course, on-street parking option in those sections, but the rest of the area is maintained. The green highlighted areas, there's no green thermo in the bike lanes currently, and so you have some of those areas proposed, and then a pedestrian crossing just south of Marigold that connects to the trail access path on Indian Bend Wash. And then as for the speed limits, traffic engineering is going to be proposing speed reductions, but that's going to be throughout the city of Tempe. Miller Road will be looked at, and these infrastructure changes, these engineering solutions are really meant to make sure the character of the collector street is maintained, and the speed reductions are just complementary of those engineering solutions. So here's a street view example that would be where the planter islands exist. Again, there is still going to be on-street parking maintained, so this is just what the street view would look like in those 6 areas with the planter islands. You have 8-foot planter islands, and then the same bike lane size and travel lane size that currently exists. And for planter island placement, we do make sure they're at least 5 feet away for any driveways. That's a best practice. For those interested in the plant material in the planter islands, this is just a sample of a larger list, but as you can see, if you're familiar, very, very native to Arizona. These are going to do much better in our hot environment, and they'll do very good with the rainwater capture that I was talking about earlier. We can put a full list on the website for those that are interested in that. And just some next steps. We have the comment period open, so a survey open today to February 10th. We will be using those comments to refine placements of some of these solutions. We do have money to make these improvements take place this calendar year, and construction is to begin mid-July, and it's supposed to take around a couple of months, so completion around mid-November. We do have a meeting taking place, an in-person meeting taking place this evening. So if you want to talk more about that, we will be there. We will be talking about Miller Road and these improvements. And I think we are now going to open it up to questions that you all have now.
Thanks, Brianne. So I did put the link to the survey in the chat as well. So if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand, which is under the React area on the bottom of your screen in Zoom, or you could put it in the chat, or please come off mute and ask any questions. Yes, David.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if it's possible to look at putting a crosswalk at Weber as well, because there is an orbit that goes through there. So I think it'd be helpful if people were able to cross at Weber as well.
Thanks, David. We can look into that.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask about is why the speed limit was at it's going to be at 30. It's going to go from 35 to 30, I think. Is that what it was?
That's what we are currently proposing. Again, we don't arbitrarily take a street and reduce the speed limit or change the speed limit on it. There's a larger comprehensive look of how that impacts adjacent streets. That's my understanding anyways. I am not a traffic engineer, but I don't know if Corey or Kathy want to add anything more to that. I do know that the traffic engineering team will be looking at a handful of streets and proposing recommendations to change some speed limits later this year.
I was just thinking that because this is a pretty like residential area and there is the community center there and there's also the park there. So I would just think maybe we should look at lowering it to at least 25 to more reflect the residential area that it is because there is, it's like you got kids playing in the park, they could kick a ball out into the street, things like that happen. So I just think 25 would be more appropriate for the area.
Mm.
And then the last thing I wanted to ask about was with the islands because I don't know if you've heard me talk about this before, but the roads produce a lot of pollution. People don't realize that, but asphalt itself actually impacts air quality. And I think that's really important to remove the on-street parking to make more space for the trees. So I wanted to know, I think we should have parking near the park because I know that the people go there and they play soccer. I've seen that. So we need the parking on the north side. But on the south side, are there ways that we could remove any more of the parking to have more trees and more shade?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had it my way, I would do that as well. However, we have heard from residents that the on-street parking is important. There is a decent amount of commercial and industrial along this area. So it would be a much larger process, an approval process that we would have to take if we wanted to take out kind of all of that on-street parking on that side. And we just believe, based off of the comments that we've received so far, that that's not something this neighborhood wants right now, but that we could start with the 6 planter islands. Again, 12 total, 6 pairs.
Will there be bus stop improvements as well?
I don't know that answer, but I've got Eric and Sam on the call.
Yeah, thanks, David. Hi, all. It's Eric Iverson with City of Tempe. We don't have, as far as the funding goes for this particular project, we do not have transit improvements per se, David. However, Sam is on the call, and our department continues to fund shelter installs around the city, and our objective right now is to do 30 shelter installs around the city. So I don't know if and those are prioritized based upon a whole host of metrics. I don't know if this particular section of Miller has any near-term bus shelter improvements, but Sam can answer that, or we can send that information back to you, David. And then I just wanted to call out on the chat that Patricia had asked for the full plant list. So I know we have a full plant list, Patricia, and it's even more plants than what is identified in the slide here, but we can send that to you. Sam, do you want to?
Yes, I'm just going to jump in quickly, and I apologize, David. I don't know off the top of my head where these bus stops fall in our prioritization matrix for new shelter installations. I know there are 3 stops included in this project. There's one northbound right at Curry, and then 2, I believe, at near Marnie, that are actually on Miller and signed as bus stops. So I can look into where those fall on our prioritization list and get back to you. If not funded as part of this project, certainly, we have aspirations in the future to improve shade coverage at those bus stops, like we do at all of our unshaded bus stops.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, David.
Okay, and then, yeah, we
Whoever
already
asked for the plant list. Yes, I can send them that directly. And like I said, we can post that as a link to download online.
Okay, and so the only comment we had in the chat was that request for the plant list. So if anyone else has any other questions, and Patricia said, thank you, a link will be great. So we'll get that on the project website. And that's just at tempe.gov/Miller Road. So we'll get that up shortly. Were there any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any, Brianne. As we had mentioned, the survey is open through February 10th, so we encourage you to take it as well as your neighbors. Okay, here's one more. How much does the plant area reduce the bike lane?
So not at all. It is just going to be removing some parking opportunities, some on-street parking opportunities, just in those kind of pairs of 6 locations, the 12 locations, right? So you have your planter island, the bike lane maintains its size and its consistency all throughout Miller Road. The travel lane stays the same, and so it's the same on both sides. No bike lane reduction or removal at all with the planter islands.
Okay, anything else? All right, Brianne, anything for a wrap up or?
I don't think so, but thanks everybody for joining, and we're excited to all work together as a new transportation and sustainability department in a quick way, coupled with the PQI. We really think residents will be very excited about the improvements coming. Thanks everyone for joining.